Hey Fred, this is a kind of response to your video Born Troublemakers, in which you talk about how one of the basic characteristic features that defines what it means to be human is perhaps our relentless and constant searching for and seeking for problems, and not necessarily finding solutions to those problems, but just searching for problems, just for the excitement that they offer, the excitement that they expose us to in the way they challenge us. Now I would like to continue on with this sentence you started and offer my part of the sentence. So I think the problem with this problem-geared attitude is that when I find solutions to initial problems, I will apply those solutions to the problems that I encounter later in my intellectual endeavors. And even if there are slight modifications in the solutions that I apply to the set of situations or problems I am dealing with, there will be a consistent pattern of distortion, I think. The world is never a mystery to be solved. The world is a mystery that is constantly changing and shifting, and it's a very complex phenomenon. So the best disposition towards it, the best disposition to adopt towards it is being resilient and flexible. And finding problems is natural and maybe important even, but bearing in mind that the solutions that I come up with are always provisional is more important, I think. Now let me put this in this way. The moment I decide to disengage myself from a situation and to reflect on that situation, in that moment, the way I was absorbed and immersed in that moment collapses into a certain way of looking at that moment. So instead of being in the moment, I am now looking at the moment, and it collapses to a certain vantage point, or more likely to a certain way of looking at the world. I prefer this metaphor because it implies that I'm walking through. It's a process, so it's a path along which I walk when I reflect on the situation. And at first, the sight, the view that this way of looking at the world that I adopt to ponder on the situation, it offers a clear sight, a clear view. But the closer I look, I may find that there are a whole lot of other related phenomena, related problems that demand further distinctions and further categories, or I don't know, and you just go on thinking about the related phenomenon, and in the end you find yourself in a forest of implications and lots of shadows and umbrage and foliage. And this is very exciting. I think this is the fascinating thing about the intellectual pursuit, that the deeper you go into a problem, the more distant you are from the world, and in that way the more richness you encounter. It's a paradox, I know, but it's like the sphere. When the sphere is little, its surface area is in contact with little unknown area. But as the sphere gets bigger and bigger, its surface area is in contact with more and more unknown areas. I think that's the working analogy. So this is the basic difference between being reflectively or pre-reflectively engaged in situations. When I'm playing pool, for example, and I am immersed in that moment, I am just being in that moment, as opposed to reflecting on that moment when I am looking at it from a certain vantage point or in a certain way, and that's very different. Now I would like to read a quote from a novel, Richard Powers' The Echo Maker, in which he writes, "How easy now to float above herself, gaze down on all the killing needs that controlled her, and see them for the phantoms they were. Nothing had the power to hurt her, except for the power she gave it. Every barrier she had ever shaved against was no more than a Chinese finger lock that opened instantly when she stopped pulling." And I think this is about the dangers of being too intensely involved emotionally in situations, when you invest too much emotion in a situation, and the best way to get out of it is maybe to let go, to simply let go. And this reminds me of the well-known example of getting into a vortex. When you are sucked into a vortex, the best way to survive the vortex is to let go and not fight against it, because the force you exert against the vortex will generate a counterforce that will suffocate you or will make you very uncomfortable. I think the main issue is, though, to realize that to let go simply is not always the best solution, especially when we are talking about intellectual pursuits, I think, and maybe even emotional engagements. I think the best way is to find a balance. It's always about finding a balance. For example, when I am anxious, because I think that I should read more, I should study more things, I should be more hardworking. The word doesn't come now, sorry. At that point I should realize that no problem, just let go and let yourself drift along, and what you find along this drifting, read those things, deal with those things, don't be too anxious. So this is a strategy I always use, but it is important to realize that the balance is what is at issue here. To find a balance between action and thought, to find a balance between being in the moment and looking at the moment in a certain way, to find a balance between action and thought, as I have said already, between being affirmative and vulnerable, a balance between being self-reliant and dependent, between being robust and mushy at the same time, to find a balance between being forceful and yielding, to be strong and weak, because there is no way around it.